Hello, and welcome to And the Runner-Up Is. This week on the show, we'll travel back in time to the 38th Academy Awards, which rewarded the films of 1965. David Lean returned after his Best Picture-winning epic Lawrence of Arabia with another sweeping epic about romance in the midst of the Russian Revolution, Doctor Zhivago. The film became a major box office success and earned 10 Oscar nominations, much like another film released in 1965, The Sound of Music. While Doctor Zhivago would earn 5 Oscar wins, it was The Sound of Music that took Best Picture in the end. So why did Doctor Zhivago come up short? We'll explore all this and more as we discuss how the Oscar almost went to Doctor Zhivago. Welcome back to And the Runner-Up Is. I am your host, Kevin Jacobson, and today we are talking about 1965 at the Oscars, which is very interesting because we have two epic movies kind of facing off. And the winner was The Sound of Music, but today we are talking about Doctor Zhivago. And joining me today is another wonderful new guest. He is a writer for the Filmotomy and co-host of this great podcast called Academy Queens. Please welcome to the show, Brandon Stanwyck.
Hello.
I'm very excited to have you on for this.
Yeah, I'm so excited to be here. I'm actually a little nervous, but
Don't be. It's okay.
it's going to be great.
Yes. Talking about a big epic movie today. So, Doctor Zhivago, let us just jump right into this. It is this epic romantic drama based on the 1957 novel of the same name by Boris Pasternak. It takes place in the 1910s through the 20s in Russia and tells the story of Yuri Zhivago, a physician, and Lara Antipova, a nurse, who are both married to other people but fall in love with each other while tending to the wounded during the Russian Revolution. And we kind of follow them through the years as they separate and come back together while escaping this new regime and trying to survive. There's also this framing device at the beginning and end of the film set in the future involving a girl who Yuri's half-brother thinks might be the daughter of Yuri and Lara. So the film was directed by the great David Lean and adapted by Robert Bolt. Omar Sharif stars as Dr. Yuri Zhivago, Julie Christie as Lara, Geraldine Chaplin, Rod Steiger, Alec Guinness, Tom Courtney, Shoban McKenna, Rita Tushingham, and Ralph Richardson. So Dr. Zhivago made $111 million at the US box office, which, adjusted for inflation, is actually over $1 billion in today's numbers. Truly insane. And it was nominated for 10 Academy Awards, winning 5 of them, but not Best Picture. Okay, so Brandon, talk to me about Dr. Zhivago.
So before rewatching it for this podcast, I hadn't seen it in maybe 10 years. Dr. Zhivago is one of those movies that I came across through lists when I first really got into movies in like middle school. I started with like the IMDb top 250 and then moved on to like the AFI lists and like that 1001 movies you have to see before you die. And Dr. Zhivago is one of those movies that appears on a lot of those types of things. So I watched it for the first time in high school and honestly wasn't super thrilled with it. And I rewatched it for this, and I admire it more now than I used to, but I don't really enjoy it, but I admire it from a cinematic standpoint. It's also a little special to me because I have a dog named Zhivago.
Huh.
It's the name he came with. We adopted him through a rescue, and he was named Zhivago, and it's both a cinematic and a literary name, and I'm into both of those things.
Yes, right up your alley.
Yeah, so we kept it. David Lean is also not really a director that I'm super warm on. He's one of those guys that I respect more than I like, I guess I could say. I don't know if that makes sense, but
Yeah.
I admire all the stuff going on in his movies. He's a true craftsman, and he's revered for exactly what he ought to be revered for. His movies just tend to not be my cup of tea, but I respect this movie for what it is, definitely.
Yeah. Well, I actually had not seen Doctor Zhivago before this. Some of that was just the length of it. It is 3 hours and 20 minutes.
Yeah,
And
I tend to avoid longer movies.
yeah, yeah. Even when it's like classics like this, I kind of just end up putting them off for a long time, for example, until right now. But I definitely knew of its reputation. I knew what it was all about. I knew the overall feeling, the kind of sweeping epic romance of it all. And it did give me that on this watch. I love the scope of the film. I love how epic it feels, these expensive costumes and sets and all those gorgeous wide shots that David Lean and his cinematographer Freddie Young were kind of the masters at. The story itself, I don't know if it truly comes alive for me.
Yeah, I agree. I don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a movie that I enjoy looking at more so than I enjoy watching as a film.
Yeah. I
Like
don't
the
know.
photography is gorgeous. The
It
art
really is.
direction is so textured and so lively and intricate, but the story itself never really grabs me.
Hmm. Yeah, I definitely agree. There are moments where it does, like sometimes like towards the end, like when Yuri and Lara are alone together in their little isolated location, and
Oh
it
yeah,
kind of you feel the human cost of all this like political squabbling and everything. I think that's great, but at the same time, I don't feel like this huge emotional attachment to this film in a way that I think it was meant to have that sort of idea of these two people caught up in this tumult, with the backdrop of the Russian Revolution.
I completely agree. It's that seems to be a thing with me and just David Lean in general. The stories never seem to really jump out at me and really take me on any sort of journey, and yet I'm always so fascinated by what I'm visually looking at because he and Freddie Young, like you said, are true two true visionaries in that regard. But the stories themselves are always a little bit lacking for me when it comes to most David Lean movies,
Yeah.
especially these big epics.
Hmm. At times it just kind of feels like he's kind of caught up in all of the formal elements of making the film epic and giving you that feeling, but not really totally investing in the story as much.
Right,
I
and I
don't
don't
know.
know that this story needs to be 3 hours and 20 minutes.
Right. Well, I'm kind of two minds about the film's length because I think there is some value in some ways to staying with these characters for so long, especially Yuri, because I feel like it definitely shows like the toll of all of these upheavals.
Sure.
But I also think having it be 3 hours and 20 minutes kind of prevents it from feeling like a true classic in my eyes where like no scenes can be cut and it's just like this perfect thing. Like I feel like there are many scenes that can be cut and reduced down and take
Probably.
take out entire storylines even like and it would be tighter and a more satisfying experience maybe.
That's probably true. And I'm also sort of two minds about it because with this length and with this extended cast, I do really like some of the work that a lot of these supporting players are doing.
Oh yeah.
Like I think Rod Steiger is really great here.
Hmm.
And of course, Tom Courtney got the nomination, and Alec Guinness is also magnificent in this.
Yeah.
So even though the movie is long and it's so packed with all of these little tiny stories within, I am sort of fascinated by these little facets. I'm not sure that they all need to exist in the same movie, if that makes sense, but
Yeah.
I am sort of the two minds about it, like you said.
It's definitely one of these films where you definitely know that this is based on a novel. And
Yes.
there's a lot of material here. I know the book is notoriously kind of hard to get through for some people.
Yeah, I own the novel, but I have not read it. I bought the novel after we adopted Zhivago, just because I felt like I had to.
Yeah.
And I found it at a little independent bookstore not too far from where I live. I have not read it yet, but it's also not that long. It's only like maybe 500 pages, like barely, which I expected it to be a lot longer considering the length of this film. So maybe there wasn't a whole lot that was cut from the novel.
Right. Well,
And it,
I want to get to some of these performances here, especially the two leads we have, which is Omar Sharif and Julie Christie. Do you buy their chemistry?
I have to say, not exactly. because, well, like I said, this movie never really grabbed me in any way, and I think I enjoy the parts more than I enjoy the sum
Hmm.
in almost every regard of this movie. Like, I enjoy these individual actors and what they're doing. I enjoy all the craftsmanship that's going on, but the movie as a whole doesn't really grab me in any way, and their chemistry perhaps suffers in that regard for me. I think Julie Christie and Omar Sharif are both good in this,
Hmm.
but I wasn't super invested in their story.
Right. Uh, I mean, they're both gorgeous people, like,
Sure, yeah,
and you could see why they would just like be naturally drawn to each other. And they both kind of like their characters, they kind of feel like outsiders and kind of like quiet observers in their own way. So I can see on some level why they would be drawn to each other. But at the same
sure.
time, I don't see a lot of passion here, in my opinion.
I agree.
Yeah. And I don't know if it's just the fact that we spend so much time with Dr. Zhivago himself, the titular role, and that I feel like Lara kind of falls by the wayside by the end, where I feel like she starts really strong in this film and is this really fascinating, independent character. But like, I feel like we just lose her for an entire hour.
Yeah, I think she is much more interesting in the beginning, especially her dynamic with Rod Steiger's character.
Hmm.
And when she decides to try to kill him, I was all team Lara at that point in the movie.
Yeah,
And then, yeah, like you said, about halfway through, the movie just kind of forgets about her.
I know.
And it doesn't really do her justice.
Right. Yeah. And this film, it's really been built up as kind of a big romantic tragedy, at least over the years for me. That's just kind of how I perceived it. And then I feel like it was like 2 hours in, and I was just like still waiting for that to happen, for that to click
Right.
into place. So that was kind of odd, but I feel like the way they are also they first kind of fall in love at the where they're treating all the wounded soldiers
At
is
their sort of makeshift hospital.
right. It's solid and they seem like they're like bonding, but I didn't necessarily feel this sense of love where they would one day be reunited and have this grand affair.
Yeah, it seems very engineered,
Hmm.
sort of a sort of connect the dots, paint by numbers sort of narrative, where it seems like David Lean is going through all the motions of showing us why these two ought to be in love, and yet it never really clicks for me.
Yeah. I just wish we got to see more of what she went through
I
all
do,
that,
yeah, I
you know?
agree. I also feel like I can't recall her name, but Yuri's wife, her character is a little two dimensional for me and a little bit too forgiving.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because watching this film, I feel like there's like nothing too wrong with her in terms of like why Yuri would want to just cheat on her basically and
Right. The
not
movie doesn't give you any reason for
yeah.
why he's really drawn to Lara in the first place, but also why he would want to leave his wife and his kids for Lara.
Yeah, who is yeah, and her name is Tanya, Geraldine Chaplin.
Yes, yes.
And I feel like she's very like patient and forgiving in a way that like I'm not saying she has to just be like this horrible bitch sort of thing
Sure,
for him to be drawn to someone else, but
but
yeah,
it's
there's
almost
like
like
nothing
she
wrong with her.
loses yeah, it's like she almost doesn't have I don't know if humanity is the right word, but she doesn't seem like a real person,
Yeah.
if that
Yeah,
makes sense.
definitely.
And she's
So,
like writing him like even when Yuri and Lara are living together in their cottage like in the wilderness, Tanya is still like writing him letters and updating him on like the family
yeah,
life, and she's just totally cool with Yuri living his life this way now.
I know.
And
Yeah.
I was kind of confused by it.
Yeah. I kind of wish the film had actually like interrogated what Yuri was doing and kind of the cost of what he was doing in terms of,
Sure.
cheating on his family and just going away from them and then like never even wanting to track them down after they are whisked away to Paris or something.
Right, like this movie never really takes a point of view, I don't
Yeah.
think.
Yeah.
Like David Lean seems, at least in this particular film, he seems very hands off when it comes to the narrative.
Hmm.
It looks like he's just filming these people and he doesn't really have a position of his own. Like, I'm not sure, when the movie's over, I'm not sure how I'm supposed to feel about Yuri and Lara's affair and how I'm supposed to feel about the Russian Revolution and what David Lean is saying with it. And so maybe that's partially why this confusion occurs with these characters and how they all relate to one another and feel about one another.
Hmm. I feel like that speaks to kind of the coldness overall of the film for me, which
Yeah.
is also like it takes place in winter, so that doesn't exactly help matters in that regard. But yeah, I do feel definitely a distance from what's happening here
Hmm.
in a way that I don't know that we are supposed to feel that distance. I feel like we are supposed to be caught up in this epic, sweeping romance of decades long, you know?
Right. I feel like in theory we're supposed to care,
Right.
but at the end of the day, I really don't.
And feel sympathy for Dr. Zhivago himself.
Exactly.
Yeah. Which I will say, though, that kind of isolated from all of these criticisms we have, I do think that the ending is still effective in its own way of being kind of tragic. Not in a way that feels like everything connected in these 3 hours and 20 minutes were worth it or something, but I really did feel the sense of tragedy here of Lara being whisked away by Komarovsky and him not wanting to go with someone he hates and eventually seeing her walking on the street and not being able to call out to her. I think honestly I would feel it on a deeper level if I had actually properly connected to the entire film itself.
Right.
But
Yeah, I
if
get
that
the
makes
I
sense.
it does because like this is a movie where I feel like it works in theory,
Hmm.
but it doesn't have the heart that I think it needs to really pull you along and to really make you feel the weight of that ending.
Right.
Like it all works on paper, but watching it, I found my mind wandering a lot of the time and I was
Mm,
never truly invested. And so when that tragic ending does happen, I felt something in a way, but it was only like I only felt it halfway because I only understood that I should be feeling something,
right.
not that I truly was.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, going away from sort of the romance stuff, I wanted to get your opinion on how this film treats this backdrop of the Russian Revolution and whether it brushes things over too much or if you thought this was kind of the perfect way of treating this story.
So I'm not like a historian anyway, so I'm not sure how accurately it's representing the Russian Revolution. But in terms of like backdrop, it seems to be a bit of, I don't want to say an afterthought, but it seems like it's only meant to be a backdrop because David Lean's not really taking much of a stance on the revolution in any way that I can really gather.
Yeah.
And I think we're supposed to be feeling things for Yuri and Lara. They're supposed to be at the forefront, and the Russian Revolution is just the environment in which their passion is being tried.
Hmm.
The Tom Courtney character I find super fascinating. He's sort of like the through line, I guess, for the whole Russian Revolution story,
Yeah.
because he starts out as a sort of idealistic guy who becomes a bit of a revolutionary. He's becoming this like Bolshevik commander, and so you get like the passage of time and the changing culture represented in his arc. And I find that kind of fascinating. And I think Tom Courtney does a really good job of showing the evolution of this character over the course of this movie. But I don't know if the Russian Revolution really becomes any more than just background noise to this romance.
Yeah. There was a lot of criticism at the time, even in 1965, that the film trivialized the Russian Revolution. And I would say that just watching the film, I don't know. I don't know if it really ever was about the revolution itself in the end, so much as just the people who are caught up in it and how it affects the lives of these two people through all this upheaval. And
Sure.
I think that's kind of where the second half of the film comes alive and makes you feel something at least. But yeah, speaking to the Tom Courtney as Pasha, who later becomes Strelnikov, this Bolshevik commander who has this reputation, I love that storyline, even if it doesn't necessarily totally fit in with everything that's happening. I'm just so fascinated by his evolution and the way Tom Courtenay plays that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
his like subplot, if we want to call it that, could almost be its own film.
that's what I was going to say exactly. It's one of these cases where I feel like this storyline it feels complete in some ways, but I also want to know more, you know?
Right, because he has this tremendous arc going from this like young idealistic dude to like infamous Bolshevik commander, and I almost want that movie
Yeah,
instead.
I want to see that story. Yeah, spin-off. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so we talked a little bit about the two performances themselves of Omar Sharif and Julie Christie. Do you think Omar Sharif truly carries this film for you?
Um, I'm leaning toward no. He's not bad for me in this in any way. I don't really have any blatant complaints, but I feel like this movie is almost too much, almost too heavy for one person to carry, especially when it's not designed to be about just one person. It's supposedly about, this relationship, and there's this huge ensemble cast. And yeah, I don't know if Omar Sharif's really carrying it all the
Yeah.
way through.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, like I was saying, he is gorgeous. Like that's
Yes.
that's that's a thing. I understand that. And he's charismatic in some ways, but I will sort of agree that I don't know if he fully carries this through the 3 hours and 20 minutes in a way that totally makes Dr. Zhivago compelling as a character.
Right.
I don't know what the disconnect was. Maybe it is kind of speaking to what we've been talking about, which is that general sense of disconnect on David Lean's part, whether it's between the emotional relationship or the Russian Revolution elements.
Right. Like David Lean, I haven't seen all of his movies, but I've seen enough to kind of make this generalization that he's a very cerebral director.
Yeah.
Most of the time I don't really get a visceral response while watching his movies. They seem very mechanical
Hmm.
in a way, and Doctor Zhivago is another example of that. And it's supposed to be this love story, but it doesn't really have much heart behind the lens. And I think that's to the movie's detriment, and perhaps to Omar Sharif's detriment too,
Yeah.
in terms of being able to carry this movie that
Right.
I don't know it was ever designed for him to carry in the way that he probably should be.
Right. And this goes back to what I was saying about how I feel like it should have been more equal between Omar Sharif and Julie Christie because Julie Christie is good.
Yeah.
Like like I said, I found the first half with her to be especially compelling. I
Mm-hmm.
kind of wanted to follow more of her story, but yeah, I think David Lean is really very much like that classic auteur kind of director where a lot of people really admire what he does with the filmmaking itself, but at the same time sort of brush over the way that the film itself is written.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I can see why. I mean, I admire him, and so many people over the years have admired David Lean. But it's
Well,
just that one element I think is critical.
yeah, well, David Lean is great in his own regard. I mean, I mean, sometimes like it feels like he invented the wide shot,
Yeah.
and it seems like color photography was created for David Lean at times. Like he's truly doing something remarkable with the medium
Hmm.
from a visual craftsman standpoint. But for me, most of the time, with few exceptions, his stories are all the narratives themselves in the films of his are what's lacking for me,
Yeah.
and it's hard for me to truly enjoy and give myself over to his movies because that disconnect does exist. I enjoy looking at his movies, but watching them is a bit of a different experience.
Yeah. I don't know where I read this. It might have been somewhere on Letterboxd or something, but someone said it's kind of just like walking through a really beautiful exhibit at a museum,
Yeah.
you know, and it's like you're just kind of admiring it from afar and it looks so great, you know, and that like maybe that would be a more effective way of like telling the story or something. Yeah. So, why do you think ultimately this film became such a success at the time? Like I said, adjusted for inflation, $1 billion. Like, why do you think this film connected with so many people?
Um, well, this is sort of that time when the epic was sort of on its way out. Like this is one of like the last epics,
Mm-hmm.
if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
And I think the book actually wasn't that old. I think the book had only been published less than 10 years before the film.
Yep.
And I think
57. Yeah.
yeah, and I think the book was somewhat infamous. I think it was being censored and perhaps banned overseas, and I think there were Soviet people who were saying bad things about it, and it was garnering press in that way. And
Mm-hmm.
so it was a very of the moment adaptation. And David Lean was sort of at the top of his game in terms of being a filmmaker, just coming off of Lawrence of Arabia a few years prior. You got Omar Sharif and Julie Christie, two gorgeous people in their prime in terms of their attractiveness.
Mm-hmm.
And it's being marketed as this epic Russian love story. And on paper, sure, I guess that's what it is. But and it is a beautifully crafted film. Freddie Young's photography is gorgeous. The art direction is stunning. Not sure. I forgot where I was going with this.
It's just a
I
lot
don't.
of different elements, I think, came together for this. Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know that the movie really adds up to
Right.
anything. It seems to be one of those things where the parts don't quite come
Congeal.
together.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I think we often remember Dr. Zhivago for what we think it ought to have been,
Mm-hmm.
more so than what it actually was.
Right. Yeah, because like I said, watching the film, I feel like 2 hours have gone by and I'm not seeing this epic romance at all.
Right.
So, yeah, I do think it was a confluence of a lot of different things. It feels like an event film and it has that scope. It's like you said, David Lean coming off Lawrence of Arabia and these two beautiful stars and this epic romance. And that often can get people to the theaters, especially at that time. And so I also do agree because I feel like we have been slightly negative about the film overall that the technical elements of this film are spectacular. Like
Yeah,
the
that's what really
cinematography
stands out
is
to me.
legendary. I mean, the costume work is great. The production design is beautiful, especially that like ice castle. I don't know how else to describe it,
Right.
but where inside it just looks so frosty. I love that.
Yeah, and
Um,
those are all the elements that make David Lean a great director. I mean, you watch a David Lean movie and you know you're going to get beautiful images, you're going to get stellar costumes, and everything that you see on the screen is going to be stunning. But yeah, it's just story's not always there.
Yeah, I love the shot where that's the frost on the window and it kind of thaws and turns into these flowers, and then it's Julie Christie. I love that whole
Oh yeah.
transition. That's beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
And I will say the score by Maurice Jarre is excellent as well.
Oh yeah.
Not as memorable as others like Lords of Arabia, for example, but still really sweeping and epic and gives you that sense of the epicness of it all.
Right.
So love that. Very deserved win there. All the technical stuff, absolutely.
Oh yeah. This is a movie about craftsmanship.
It is. Yeah. Just before we move on, I wanted to know which half of the film you preferred because people differ on that.
I prefer the second half. I find the second half to be more human, and I was closer to being engaged with the characters in the second half. I think the first half is maybe grander in scope, and you get a lot more of the visuals and a lot more of the costumes and the photography and all that stuff that makes David Lean iconic. But I'm more drawn to the more um, humane second half of this movie.
Yeah, I agree, which is not something I would usually say because I typically like act ones are usually a lot more interesting to me and a lot of people, I imagine, especially films that I've been talking about here on the show, like Funny Girl, for example, is a great example of that. But yes, the second half is a lot more engaging for me, and it feels like it's where the film is clicking into more of what it wants to be about.
Right. I feel like what the movie's sort of marketed as is clearer in the second half.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, because the whole love story thing doesn't really start to culminate until the second half.
Right. Like they don't even kiss in the first half.
Right. And it's like the
So
first half is almost just this extended backdrop.
Right. It's just a kind of an extended prologue almost to what the real story is going to be
Yeah,
about.
it's like an hour and a half of exposition.
Yes. And then this long train sequence.
Yes.
Yeah. But I definitely admire the film. I think it's a hell of a technical achievement, and I don't want to take anything away from that at all.
Sure.
But as we've been saying, I do think the story is lacking. And I don't know if I would imagine a different director might have been able to treat the story itself better.
Yeah, and like I don't usually think of David Lean as like an actor's director.
Right.
Of course, he gets great performances in his films because he casts these remarkable performers. And yet we don't really think of David Lean as an actor's director in the way that we would say Sidney Lumet
Oh,
or
yeah.
people of that generation.
Hmm.
But perhaps if maybe someone more attuned to performance had been behind the camera, maybe the story would have been a little bit more passionate,
Right.
and it maybe would have grabbed us
Hmm.
in a
Like,
different way.
like going into this, I saw that, Omar Sharif and Julie Christie were not nominated, and I'm like, that's interesting. This film has all these nominations. It's this big epic thing, and yet its two stars are not nominated. And then when I see the film, I'm like, well, I understand.
That tracks.
That tracks, exactly.
Well, Tom Courtenay got in. I believe he was the only actor.
Yeah, he was the only one. Yep.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a mixed bag overall on Dr. Zhivago, I would say. But
Yeah.
once again, I admire it and I understand kind of why it is what it is, why it has become this classic, why it has endured, maybe not in a way that The Sound of Music has, but
Sure.
still is an impactful film for a lot of people.
Yeah, a movie that I respect more than I like.
So if you have any other thoughts, we could move on.
I think I'm all right.
Okay, excellent. So when we come back, we will be discussing why Dr. Zhivago lost Best Picture to another epic film, The Sound of Music.
I'm looking for someone.
Comrade Doctor, I need a medical officer.
Are you a nurse?
Yes.
Then help me.
You know, you often look at me as though you knew me.
I have seen you.
Yuri, there's an extraordinary girl.
I know, I'm dancing with her.
What happens to a girl like that when a man like you has finished with her?
I give it to you.
If only there was someone to look after you. Of course, if there were, I'd be destroyed by jealousy.
Don't. We've not done anything you'll have to lie about. Goodbye, Zhivago. Zhivago. Oh, Lord, this is an awful time to be alive.
No, no.
What are we going to do?
I don't know.
Wouldn't it have been lovely if we'd met before?
I think we may go mad if we think about all that.
I shall always think about it.
And we're back. So now we will be discussing why Dr. Zhivago lost Best Picture to The Sound of Music. Dr. Zhivago was nominated for 10 Oscars, including Best Picture, Best Director for David Lean, Best Supporting Actor for Tom Courtenay, Best Adapted Screenplay, Best Art Direction, Color, Best Cinematography, Color, Best Costumes Design, Color, Best Film Editing, Best Original Score, and Best Sound, and it won 5 of them for Adapted Screenplay, Art Direction, Cinematography, Costume Design, and Original Score. So Zhivago, it won the Golden Globe for drama, while The Sound of Music won the Golden Globe for comedy musical. Sound of Music also won the DGA and this special WGA award, especially for like Best American Musical, that it was the only nominee for that. So let's talk about why The Sound of Music ultimately ends up prevailing here. Do you think it's just kind of the warmness of The Sound of Music?
I think that's certainly a part of it.
Yeah.
The Sound of Music is definitely warmer, and I also think it's a more enjoyable film. Um, it's the movie that I'm more likely to watch again, I would say.
Yeah.
Um, and it's just it's a more fun movie to watch. It carries you through with the music and Julie Andrews is doing her thing, and it's just a more enjoyable experience overall, I would say.
hmm Yeah, it's really kind of a no-brainer when you look at the two of them as far as what would appeal more to a mass group of voters,
Yeah.
you know? And it has all this great iconic music that has still endured all these years later. Like watching this film again, it had been a while since I had seen this, probably since I was a kid, because it's my mother's favorite movie, and we always used to watch it. And it's I was just surprised at how many like bangers are on this soundtrack.
Right.
Like it is wall to wall great music that has endured.
Right. Like this was my first time watching it also in maybe 10 years.
hmm
And to be honest, I was actually kind of dreading rewatching it because when I was a kid, I didn't like it.
Yeah.
And I like it more now as an adult. I'm not sure what that says about me. Maybe I'm just more open
Let's
to it.
interrogate that. Why do you think that is?
I think when I was a kid, I just didn't like musicals.
Ah,
I think that came later when like I did like theater in like college and stuff, and maybe my mind changed. But when I was a kid, I just really wasn't into musicals in any way. I kind of avoided them and dreaded them. And so I think when I first saw this movie way back then, it was kind of a drag for me in that way.
mhm,
I thought it was kind of lame, maybe.
right.
But watching this last week, I found myself genuinely enjoying it a lot more than I had. And I was surprised by that.
Yeah. And also, speaking of great visuals, I think the fact that it's totally shot on location is a huge reason why the film gives you that special feeling, because it's
Yeah.
just so epic and it just sweeps you away to this beautiful location where all of these wonderful songs are being sung, but also there's Nazis. by,
Right.
by the end, it doesn't come in until very late in the film, but still, for the most part, it's just Julie Andrews really, I think, is what carries this entire film, and there's a reason why she becomes so iconic with both Mary Poppins and especially The Sound of Music.
In back-to-back years, I think.
I know, yeah. I mean, that's crazy to me.
Yeah.
But yeah, she just has this effervescent spirit that really just carries the whole thing. And
She really does.
yeah, and I just love her. She is truly a treasure.
Yeah.
So I think that's a huge part of the film's appeal, and that is another film that was a giant box office success, even more than Doctor Zhivago. So yeah, it was just everyone had Sound of Music fever.
Yeah, and this is also a movie that you're more likely to take your family to than say Doctor Zhivago.
For sure.
So I'm sure that probably helped when it comes to the box office and the general consensus surrounding it. Yeah, Julie Andrews does carry this movie in the way that Omar Sharif couldn't.
Yeah.
In Doctor Zhivago, and part of that is by design.
Mm-hmm.
And also, Julie Andrews is a treasure, like you said.
Yeah.
And she's remarkable. And part of what makes this movie so successful is Julie Andrews. And she's giving us one of her most legendary performances here.
Mm-hmm. I was looking at Inside Oscar before this, and there was quite a lot of praise at the time for the film. There was one headline from the Hollywood Reporter that literally said, "Sound of Music restores faith in the art of motion pictures."
Oh, wow.
And they went on to say, "If you sit quietly and let it take, it may also restore your faith in humanity." Yeah. And then there's the reviewer is going on to say, once there was Mary Pickford, and then there was Garbo, and now there is Julie.
Right.
Yeah, definitely. Like a sustained love affair between moviegoers and a star in the history of motion pictures. Yeah, so
and she's delightful in this movie.
Yeah, she really is. So it was clearly, like I said, Sound of Music fever, and there was, I think, no way that any film could really surpass it. And the reason Dr. Zhivago is the runner-up here is kind of just by default in some ways. It wins 5 Oscars, and the other 3 films in the race really did not come anywhere close to the impact of either The Sound of Music or Dr. Zhivago. So there's that.
Right, because Sound of Music and Dr. Zhivago became sort of cultural moments.
Right, in a way that none of the other three did.
Right.
Yeah. Well, actually, let's get to some questions here because we got quite a few for both Zhivago and The Sound of Music. So this was from Gordon at Mark Wahlberg, who said, despite all the Zhivago love, why did Omar Sharif miss out on a nomination?
Well, I mean, like we said, he doesn't exactly carry the movie in the way that he probably should have, and part of that is David Lean's fault, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think that's the main thing. I think the story just doesn't really grab you, and it doesn't, despite how long the movie is, it doesn't really give Omar Sharif all that many opportunities outside of the screen time.
Yeah. Someone replied to this question that basically saying racism.
That also could have been a factor.
Probably a factor as well, but
yeah, I'm not going to say that's not a thing, but also the movie.
I do think the movie, even though it is so set on his character, it almost doesn't. I don't know if it's that the film doesn't or that he doesn't really totally envelop the character itself in a way that's super compelling.
Right. So, I mean, we've seen Omar Sharif in other performances where he does do that.
Super charming and great, yeah.
Yeah, so we know he's capable of it. I think the majority of it is the material and David Lean's direction of it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, again, I looking at it, I'm like, wow, they did not nominate Omar Sharif, and he carries this whole film that people love. How did this happen?
In the titular role.
In the titular role. And yet, yeah, I'm watching it. I'm like, well, I kind of get it.
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah.
I don't scoff at that snub.
Yeah, sadly. Well, we got quite a few Sound of Music questions as well. One of which was from Oliver Hetherington Page, who said, was Julie Andrews snubbed for a Best Actress win?
I'm not sure. I could see how she could win in another year. I could see the narrative there. She does just win the year before for Mary Poppins, but
That's
also there's that. But also, Julie Christie is really good in Darling.
She is.
So we got two really great performances here in Julie Andrews and Julie Christie.
Two great Julies. Yep.
Yes, and I could see Julie Andrews winning for this back to back with Mary Poppins, and it would make sense. But also, Julie Christie's so good in Darling that I can't honestly say that Julie Andrews was robbed.
Right. I think personally I would probably go for Julie Andrews here just because she creates such an indelible character and is just, it's one of these things where I can't picture anyone else in this role.
Right. And through the lens of 2019, it's an iconic character. You know?
Right. Yeah.
Of course, in 1965, they had no way of knowing that. But now looking at it through today, Sound of Music is iconic.
Yeah. And people look back on this race and they're like, how the hell did Julie Christie win for Darling? And most of them had not seen Darling, of course, because Sound of Music is what it is. But yeah, along these lines, Andrew Carden said, had Julie Andrews not triumphed for Mary Poppins, does she win for The Sound of Music?
I could see it.
I could see it as well. It is the Best Picture winner, after all.
Right. Darling's also a Best Picture nominee, so Julie Andrews has that, or Julie Christie has that going for her. But personally, I lean a little more toward Julie Christie. That's more of the type of performance that I really like. But Julie Andrews is a really close runner-up for me, and I could definitely see her winning, whether or not she had won for Mary Poppins.
I do think that if she had not won for Mary Poppins, that there would have been this giant narrative of like, this person is clearly the next leading lady star. Like,
oh yeah,
we need to give her an Oscar after Mary Poppins and now The Sound of Music. Like, it has to happen now. So that's what I would imagine.
I could see that.
But Julie Andrews, it's well documented that she was very happy for Julie Christie. So it all works out.
Right, and she had an Oscar already.
Exactly.
So
yeah,
it's okay.
This is from Kyle Bailey, who has changed his Twitter name from Dalton Dumbo to Glenda Miss Jackson if you nasty.
Oh boy.
He met Glenda Jackson. It's a whole thing.
Oh, no, I'm jealous.
Yeah. He said, do you think Julie should have pulled off back-to-back wins? Also, Sound of Music is my favorite Best Picture winner.
I could see it. if she had pulled off back-to-back wins, I would not be mad about it whatsoever.
Yeah.
She created two legendary performances. I'm trying to think of different ways to put it, but Maria Von Trapp and Mary Poppins are two performances, two legendary
Yeah.
characters that we still think about today. Almost everyone has seen those movies. They've stood the test of time for a reason, and part of that reason is Julie Andrews. So I could see the double win there.
Yep. Jeffrey Kerr said, "The Sound of Music has been considered to be one of the rare film adaptations that improves upon its source material. However, Ernest Lehman was not recognized for his contributions. Do you think The Sound of Music deserved its snub for Best Adapted Screenplay? If not, which of the actual nominees would you have personally bumped out for it?"
So I have never seen or read the source material. I've only ever seen this movie. And I also have a little bit of like a tepid take when it comes to the screenplay categories. And I don't think you can judge a screenplay by its movie. So I'm not quite sure how to answer the question. I guess if I had to, just looking at would this be material based on another medium?
Yes.
So I'm gonna say Cat Ballou.
Yeah.
Was probably the one that I would bump if I had to.
I'd bump Ship of Fools.
Having not read any of these screenplays and not knowing how they
Right.
hold up on the page.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say Cat Ballou, maybe Ship of Fools is a close second.
Yeah. I think I would bump Ship of Fools there. I don't know if that's like a technical writing achievement at all. But Dr. Zhivago won this category, so what do we know?
Right.
Kel Loves Movies asked, if Eleanor Parker got into supporting for The Sound of Music, who would she kick out? Peggy Wood, perhaps?
So I would nominate Eleanor over Peggy, personally.
Same.
I have not seen all the nominees in this category. I've in fact only seen Peggy Wood and Shelley Winters.
Yeah, same. I haven't seen Othello or Inside Daisy Clover.
I purposefully did not watch Othello for this because there's something about watching Laurence Olivier shout for 3 hours in blackface that just did not appeal to me.
That's fair.
So I did not watch Othello. My apologies.
That's fine.
But I would say I'd be more inclined to nominate Eleanor Parker over Peggy Wood.
I agree. Yeah. Peggy Wood is wonderful, and she has that great Climb Every Mountain, which...
Sure. Now, if you remove that song from the movie, is Eleanor Parker the shoo-in?
Probably, because she doesn't get much outside of that.
Right. That was kind of like what I was thinking while watching the movie. It seems like she kills that song. She does a really good job with that song. But other than that, Eleanor Parker, I think, is given a little bit more material to work with.
Oh, yeah.
On a story character level.
Yeah.
So I'd be more inclined to nominate Eleanor Parker, who I think was a 3-time nominee at this point.
Right. Yeah. And she has a very fun character to play as kind of this scheming baroness. So
yes,
it's always fun.
I love a scheming baroness.
I mean, don't we all? Okay, so last Sound of Music question from Christian Bonamusa. How do you solve a problem like Maria?
I don't think anyone has the answer to that question.
Nobody does. She is a will-o'-the-wisp. She is a clown.
Maria has no kryptonite.
Yeah, absolutely. By the way, if you haven't seen the general you listening, haven't seen Ariana Grande on Saturday Night Live doing this Sound of Music sketch, it's wonderful. Please look it up.
She's great on Saturday Night Live. I'm just going to throw that out there. Anytime she's on Saturday Night Live, it's gold.
Just saying. Yep. Okay, well, let's move on to some of these other Best Picture nominees. I think it would be fitting to go next to Darling, since that's another Julie Christie film. So Julie Christie does win Best Actress for this. She's playing this kind of mod girl fashion model who is kind of caught up in a lot of different romantic entanglements. She's jet setting all over the world and ultimately is kind of unsatisfied with her life.
Yes.
So what do we think of Darling?
I like Darling. This was my first time watching it, doing my research for this podcast, and I'm a fan of John Schlesinger. Mm-hmm. And this is one of his earlier pictures, before he does Midnight Cowboy and Sunday Bloody Sunday. And you definitely see a lot of the groundbreaking techniques and types of characters that he would go on to explore in later films here. This movie's Darling is more formally playful than I thought it would be.
Yeah.
I was not expecting that from a movie from 1965. And Julie Christie is great here. I don't scoff at her win at all. I think she's doing a remarkable job, and I think this is a really good early outing from John Schlesinger.
It is, yeah. And this was a big critics' favorite. I believe it won the New York Film Critics Best Picture Prize, even over those two big mammoth films.
It seems very much a critics type of movie.
Oh yeah, the critics' push of the year was really Darling here, which I understand. It does have kind of that new wave influence in many ways.
Yeah, it's very new wave, and also has sort of like a raw edginess at times.
Exactly. Yeah.
And very groundbreaking in terms of the content that it's covering, as well as how John Schlesinger is filming it.
Yeah, very sexually open in many ways, and
very, very queer actually.
Yeah, definitely.
That's something else I wasn't expecting.
Definitely a surprise. I agree. Yeah. I go back to, I think Julie Andrews probably deserved this in the end for me, but sure. I think Julie Christie it's not like she's a bad winner by any means. Like, she is one of my favorite, actually, best actress winners of the 60s, I would say, which has a lot of great people winning. But yeah, I think the film is good. I don't know if it's fully like a classic for me, but was certainly I was certainly engaged with it in a way even more than I was with Dr. Zhivago. So there's that.
I agree. I think Darling is definitely a building block to what John Schlesinger would go on to do in later films. Mm-hmm. And so in that way, it's definitely noteworthy.
Yeah. Well, we got a question from Emily at Ballroom Pink saying, does Darling deserve a second chance from me?
Okay.
Yes. I think it does. Yes, absolutely.
I mean, this was my first time watching it, so I don't have a prior viewing experience to compare it to. But this first time watch for me, I liked it quite a bit.
Yeah.
So I'd say go for it.
Yeah. I don't know if I have any other thoughts on Darling, but Ship of Fools is kind of our big epic all-star picture of this race that happens a lot in the 60s and 70s, as I've been talking about. Everyone in the same location on this ship. What do we think of Ship of Fools?
It gets an extended sigh from me.
Uh-huh.
I did not care for it really at all. It was kind of a huge drag for me. I'm struggling to find anything that I really liked about it. I guess Vivien Leigh's pretty cool.
Vivien Leigh is just like this boozy older woman, just
who I want to be when I'm her age.
Yes, that is goals.
Yeah. Yes. But the movie itself, I found myself simply just not caring about really any of these characters at some point. Mm-hmm. And the movie at some point just kind of keeps dragging on. And I never really knew when it was going to be over.
Yeah, this is another movie that is very long.
Does not need to be.
Dr. Zhivago or Sound of Music. It's 2 hours, 2.5 hours. Yeah, but I agree. It does not need to be. I do think. Do I like any of the other performances here? I'm just looking through this cast. I think Michael Dunn, who plays kind of the Greek chorus character that we're introduced to in the beginning and then at the end, is good. So there's that. Vivien Leigh is good. Lee Marvin is in this.
Yes.
He was having quite a year. He wins Best Actor for Cat Ballou, and he's in this as like this baseball player or something.
Who Vivien Leigh beats up with her shoe,
which is great.
That was my favorite scene.
Yes. I don't know. It's not a very interesting or compelling narrative for me. This is Stanley Kramer directing.
Right. He had just come off of Judgment at Nuremberg, and which I think is a remarkable film. I like Judgment at Nuremberg a lot.
Yep.
And so I was actually kind of looking forward to Ship of Fools. And then at a certain point, I was like, what am I watching?
Yeah. And why am I watching?
Right. Now,
I don't know.
Another actor who is having a decent year is Oscar Werner.
Yes.
Who's nominated for lead actor for Ship of Fools, who plays a supporting part in The Spy Who Came in from the Cold. And I think he's much better in The Spy Who Came in from the Cold. It's a supporting part, that doesn't give him as much screen time, but but there's so much more material for him to work with, and he creates a really great performance in that film. And I wish he had been nominated for that instead.
Yeah, I was not able to get to that movie. It was a very busy week for me, but
Sure.
I will take your recommendation on that. Yeah.
Yeah.
We did get a question from Peter Osyke, who said Ship of Fools was two-time Oscar winner Vivien Leigh's final role, which is true. Should she have been nominated for Best Actress alongside fellow Oscar winner Simone Signoret, or should she have taken Signoret's spot? If she would have been nominated alongside, whose spot should she have taken?
I would not say alongside, because if I were to bump anyone, it would be Simone.
Okay, yeah.
I don't know if I would nominate Vivien Leigh here. Actually, no, I don't think I would, because there's 5 performances in other movies that I prefer over her. But Vivien Leigh was probably the thing that I liked best about Ship of Fools.
Yeah.
But I don't think it gets a nomination from me.
I would say, considering the ensemble nature of the film, she could very well have just been in supporting actress.
Oh, sure,
And
yeah.
it wouldn't have been that much of a big deal.
That's true.
So if we put her in there, absolutely.
Yeah, it is such a large ensemble that I could see her, or frankly, almost anyone in this movie being supporting.
I know.
And
Yeah.
I wouldn't be screaming category fraud.
Right.
But yeah, I could see that.
Mm-hmm. Well, the other film in this race is 1,000 Clowns. And this film, I believe, gets only like 3 nominations, including Best Picture. So one of those that kind of barely gets in. 1,000 Clowns. Let's talk about this. This was hard to find, for the record.
Right.
It took a long time to track this down. Turns out it's on YouTube.
Yes.
So in full. Just saying. If anyone wants to watch it, since it's not
for
available
free.
anywhere else, I grant you the right to do that.
Well, the Cleveland Public Library does have it on DVD.
Okay.
But I was able to watch it on YouTube since you told me about it.
Well, yeah, it's perfectly in good condition. So I don't know. But yes, this is kind of an indie film, I would say, of its time.
A little bit, yeah.
You know, I when I was watching this, I don't know if this will make any sense, but it felt like the kind of film that film Twitter would have like championed at the time.
I could see that.
I don't know. It just has kind of this appeal to it that's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of a small, scrappy little film.
Right. So you could see people fighting for it, you know?
Yeah, it's got some really sharp writing. It's based on a play. The playwright adapted the script.
Herb Gardner. Yep.
Right. And Jason Robards is really good here. I think he's so charming and handsome in this. And Barbara Harris is a delight.
Yes.
And even I'm blanking on his name, the boy who plays, I think it's Robards' nephew, is it? He plays this sort of precocious kid character who usually that character type usually gets on my nerves. But I thought he did really well with the role. I thought he was great. Actually.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I don't know if 1,000 Clowns is groundbreaking in any way, but it's a very enjoyable film. It's an inspired Best Picture nomination.
It is.
But I did enjoy it for what it's worth.
Yeah, I very much enjoyed it. I feel like nobody talks about this movie at all.
Right. Well, when you're in a year with Sound of Music and Doctor Zhivago, it's easy to be the one pushed out of the conversation.
Yeah. And I do think it's probably a clear number 5 of this Best Picture lineup, just kind of barely getting in. But yeah, I found it to be very enjoyable. For those who don't know what it is, which it may be a lot of you.
Yeah.
It's kind of about this unemployed TV writer who's Jason Robards, who has this nephew, Nick, and it's this whole thing where he has to find job and find fulfillment, and meets Barbara Harris, and it's just this kind of cute, charming, small scale film that I think is well written. I will say, which is rare for the films we've been talking about.
Yeah, well, it's based on a really tight play, so
yeah,
I think that makes sense. The Barbara Harris character, I do love Barbara Harris in it, but she falls for Robards in a way that's a little unbelievable for me.
Sure.
It's very old Hollywood, old Broadway.
Yeah.
I just kind of went with it, but at the same time, in the back of my mind, I was like, you just met him. It's one of those things, but she is really fun here, and I believe she got a Golden Globe nomination out of it. That didn't translate to the Oscars, unfortunately, but she's really good.
Yeah, Barbara Harris. We've been talking quite a bit about her over the past decade or so. Yeah,
She sneaks into a lot of these big classic movies from this era.
she really does, and she always, I think, stands out. So that was a very sad loss last year that we lost her.
Yeah.
But yeah, she was definitely a key, like, ace in the hole, I would say, kind of performer. Well, we got another fun question from Jackson DeStefano, who said, "Would you send in the clowns if there were 1,000 of them?"
Well, I don't know what else I would do with them, so of course I would send them in.
I would for sure send them in. Okay, so well, let's get to just these two acting questions because they're kind of related to what we've been talking about. Mark Brinkerhoff said, because Lee Marvin and Julie Christie, the year's Best Actor, Best Actress winners, starred in two other big hits the same year, do you think that put them over the top? And how close might they have been to nominations for Ship of Fools and Doctor Zhivago, respectively?
I don't know where to start.
Well, I will say I do think the fact that they were both in two big films helped their narratives. We've seen that happen a lot over the years, where someone has a really good year, Alicia Vikander, for example, and that kind of propels them to a victory. So I think that definitely helps in both of those cases, probably.
Yeah. I'm sure that definitely helped. Could Lee Marvin have gotten in? Could he have gotten in for Ship of Fools? Sure.
Fine.
I could see him getting in for supporting. I haven't seen all the supporting nominations, so I'm not sure who I would bump, but I could see it. I think Julie Christie was nominated for the correct performance.
I agree. Easily.
Yeah. So she's carrying Darling. It gives her much more material to work with, and that was definitely the right nomination there. Lee Marvin, I have problems with Cat Ballou.
Yeah.
Particularly his win, for a few reasons. One, it's a very silly juvenile performance that I would say is category fraud.
It is. I agree.
That's Jane Fonda's story. Lee Marvin doesn't come in until like 40 minutes in, and even once he's there, he's not in for the rest of the movie. He's
and it's not about
throughout.
him.
The movie's not about him in any way, and it's a really lightweight comedic performance. Not to say that comedy can't win, but there's really no meat to this performance. And when you're in a lineup with Rod Steiger in The Pawnbroker and Richard Burton in The Spy Who Came in from the Cold, I don't understand how that win happened, despite him being in two big movies that year. Because Rod Steiger, I don't know if you've seen The Pawnbroker, but it's marvelous. And Rod Steiger, that's
Rod Steiger also having a great year.
Yeah. Oh, right, because he was also in Doctor Zhivago. Yeah. So in my mind, The Pawnbroker is the movie Rod Steiger should have his Oscar for, if he were to only have one. And I just revisited the movie this week for this podcast, and I was struck by it when I watched it several years ago. This is an early Sidney Lumet film, beautifully photographed. The art direction is really stunning. And Rod Steiger delivers a beautiful performance. And the fact that Lee Marvin won for Cat Ballou over him, like, blows my mind.
It's kind of a joke. Yeah.
And makes me low-key angry.
Yeah. Well, speaking to that a little bit, we got a question from Mark Lamb, who said, "What a shock that Lee Marvin won for a comedy. The others were in very serious films. Who was the runner-up?" I'd like to say Burton, but I think it was Steiger.
I think Steiger, because, I mean, like I said, The Pawnbroker's great. And so is Rod Steiger, who was also in Doctor Zhivago. So he had the two movie thing going for him too.
Oh, yeah.
Richard Burton's also really good in The Spy Who Came in from the Cold, but not really. It's not his best outing, and it's not gonna get my personal vote. But he's also doing a really good job there. I would put him over Lee Marvin, but Rod Steiger is my personal winner.
Also, you would have an Oscar if that were the case, which we should have done as a society.
Yes. Yeah, we really dropped the ball on Richard Burton there.
We did. We all did. We're all culpable.
Yes. But I would say the runner-up was probably Rod Steiger.
I would agree, especially based on what you're saying. But also what I've read also from Inside Oscar, that he was considered definitely up there. And that the Cat Ballou win for Lee Marvin was kind of a surprise. So, yeah. I don't know if Lee Marvin was just
a well-liked person in the industry at
I
that moment
think
or what,
so.
but I don't understand how anyone would vote for his performance in Cat Ballou over Steiger or Burton.
Yeah. If he was in the supporting actor category, maybe I would feel a little
Maybe.
better about that, but
Yeah, I wouldn't be quite as mad if he were in the
yeah,
supporting actor category, frankly,
sure.
because that's where he should be anyway.
Yeah,
And also, it's really not a type of performance that really ought to be winning lead actor.
right. He is playing two roles in it, I will say, but also the other
Mm,
role he's playing is just like this silent villain that
yeah.
doesn't get a lot to do. So I don't know if that counts as like this wide range by any means,
Mm,
but anyway, so those were the Best Picture nominees of 1965. I'd say it's a mixed bag overall, kind of like 66,
yeah.
but I think there's some clear highlights here. I do think The Sound of Music kind of towers over all of them, personally speaking. But
Yeah.
I think Darling's very good. I think Doctor Zhivago certainly is worthy of being nominated. I would say that, even if I have
Yeah.
story problems with it, I do think it deserves its nomination.
I agree.
A Thousand Clowns is, again, very small, but has its moments. Ship of Fools, I can't really defend too much, to be honest, but
Yeah, I will not be defending Ship of Fools.
yeah,
It's my personal fifth place in
absolutely
this
agree with
lineup.
that. Yeah. So let's get to other films that should have been a contender. And these are other films not nominated for Best Picture or any old film that came out in 65. So, Brandon, what are your films here?
Well, I already mentioned The Pawnbroker, so I'm going to check that
Yes.
off.
Mm-hmm.
Woman in the Dunes.
Yes.
I love Woman in the Dunes. I am so glad it got nominated for director, and I think it was up for Best Foreign Film the year prior.
Right.
I think it's a remarkable film, such a cool story, so weird too.
Mm-hmm.
And I could have seen this movie getting in cinematography, art direction, and even the lead actors, honestly.
Yeah.
Um, I think the movie should have been nominated for more things, but of course, it's got the foreign film bias going for it this time in Oscar history.
Mm-hmm.
They at least threw the director a bone, but I think it should have gotten more love.
Yeah, so this is like a Japanese new wave film. Hiroshi Teshigahara is the first Asian director to be nominated for Best Director. So breaking ground there. And it's a very inspired choice on the Academy's part because we do
Yeah,
not see films like this getting nominated for Best Director or any sort of big categories very much. To me, it felt like kind of like an extended episode of The Twilight Zone in a way
yeah,
where it's just like this one guy who gets caught up in this location where it's kind of this strange land where everyone has different rules to things, and it's really just fascinating and kind of about how he is able to escape. And yeah, I think it's impeccably filmed. The cinematography probably should have won. Honestly,
yeah.
best cinematography was not nominated, but it should have won.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, the performances are super compelling, and this is one like love story that I bought. So
Yeah, this black and white cinematography definitely should have won over Ship of Fools.
yeah, that's
And I don't
ridiculous.
understand that win whatsoever.
Not at all.
But yeah, Woman in the Dunes definitely should have taken that. Also, probably should have been in art direction and should have won over Ship of Fools as well, because I don't understand how Ship of Fools won that award either.
Yeah, sand is scary.
Yes, Sand is very scary. Sand is like the main villain of this movie.
It is, and
Well, and the village people.
yes, but yeah, just the way that the sand itself is filmed and the way it's like the close-ups on the skin, it's so like tactile, you know.
I don't know if Sand can do all the things that the lead actress says that it can do, like rotting wood and all this stuff, but I believed her.
Yeah,
When
absolutely.
she said that the sand was going to destroy their home and it was going to literally kill them, I was like, okay, I'm with you.
Totally.
Let's get rid of this sand.
Yes, the sand has to go. Yes. Well, speaking of international films, The Umbrellas of Cherbourg comes out
Yes.
this year, and that is a lovely film. There was a lot of talk about this when La La Land was released because Damien Chazelle was very inspired by this film. This is an entirely sung through French film, and it's beautiful. the colors are just everything in this film. It's one of the clearest examples of like color cinematography there is,
Hmm.
really. And it's in 1965. So this is one of these films that I talked about this like a few weeks ago or months ago on Twitter about how like this is the kind of film that's like very much my shit, which is just
Yeah.
like two people who are kind of in this doomed romance. I'm like, yes, I'm all about it.
Yes.
And the music is really good, and I love "I Will Wait for You." I think that's so heartbreaking and haunting as a song.
Hmm. Yeah, Catherine Deneuve is great in that film, as is the leading man, who's quite handsome.
Yes,
Um,
again, gorgeous stars. Yeah,
yeah, and it's a very, it's like visual candy.
it
It's a
is.
really pretty movie to watch.
Yeah, it's just candy colored
Yes.
wonderfulness, but also
Yeah.
heartbreaking by the end of things, but in a way that feels earned, I would say.
Oh
And
yeah.
again, you really feel in this case, I mean, this is only like a 90-minute film, I think, but
Yeah, it's shorter than I expected it to be.
yeah, but you feel kind of the passage of time in a way even comparable to Doctor Zhivago, which is twice as long. But in this
Yeah.
case, you feel kind of their loss in a way that I
Yeah.
found more compelling with half the time. So
Yeah,
make of
I would
that what you
agree.
will.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%.
Yeah. Um,
Speaking of Catherine Deneuve, she has another movie this year called
yes.
Repulsion.
Yes.
Very fucked up movie.
Hmm.
She plays a woman with like severe depression who's like trapped in an apartment, and she's having these like horrific visions and nightmares that might actually be her memories or some like twisted version of her memories. And it's a tour de force performance from Catherine Deneuve, and it's a trip.
It
This
is a
movie,
trip. Yeah. It's very much one of these paranoid thrillers
yeah,
that is well, we should just say to get it out of the way, directed by Roman Polanski.
yes,
But I think it's really one of his best films, clearly.
I agree.
And
It's probably
Catherine
like
Deneuve,
my top three.
yeah, for sure. And they're really able to capture, and I believe it's like very low budget as well. Like,
Yeah,
yeah, very low budget. It's kind of like what I was talking about with Night of the Living Dead, where it's a super low budget indie film, but they just get to this primal fear in a way that's so real. It's
yeah,
visceral. It's that
yeah.
you
That
feel the paranoia alongside her. So
yeah, the
yeah.
terror is palpable in this
Hmm.
film. I think I watched it for the first time at like 1 in the morning,
Oh God.
and it was like when I was in school, and I think I rented it from the library, and I couldn't sleep, and I was like, I'm gonna pop in the Repulsion,
Yeah.
and it was like 1 in the morning, and I was like, what the hell am I watching? And I was living for it.
Yeah. Are you a big like horror thriller person?
Yeah, the next movie I was gonna mention is a foreign horror film,
Well, there you go.
and that is Onibaba. I think I'm
Ah,
saying that correctly. It's a
okay.
Japanese film.
Yep.
I believe it was released in '64 in Japan, but I think it hits the States in '65. So I'm going to say it's from this
Yeah.
year.
That's kind of what I go by. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's about two women who kill wandering samurai and sell their belongings. And at a
Love it.
certain point, the women sort of turn on each other and it gets real twisty. And there's a mask, like a terrifying mask that one of the women puts on, and bad things happen. So I don't want to give too much away because it's a really strange film that I think is probably best gone into not knowing very much.
Yeah.
It's a Criterion Collection film, so it's pretty accessible in that way. But yeah, Onibaba is it's a pretty good experience if you're into foreign horror films.
Yeah, I have not seen that, but that sounds excellent, and I'm very interested in that
I'm
for its
all
premise. Yeah,
I'm all about women killing men.
hell yeah,
It's my favorite premise.
it is. It's like if that's the concept, you're gonna be there regardless. Well, actually, going back to Repulsion real quickly, we got a question about it. San
Oh,
Diego Cinerama said, "How does Catherine Deneuve not get a nomination for Repulsion?"
I probably would have nominated her myself.
I would too, and she
Yeah,
is once again having a good year. A lot of
yeah.
people having good years.
The
Mm.
65 was a hell of a year for people to have a good year.
To have like multiple great performances. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, I would have nominated her. I agree. Tough category, but
Yeah.
I would have slotted her in there because she's horror, we've talked about it. Horror certainly is um, a genre that the Academy just has no real respect for, even still, as we've
Yeah,
seen.
right.
And especially in 1965, I don't think that was ever going to happen. But
In a way, you could argue that Woman in the Dunes is a horror film in a way.
absolutely, like I said, it has kind of that Twilight Zone aspect to it.
Yeah, not in the traditional sense, perhaps, but there's parts of that movie that are legitimately horrifying.
Yeah, especially if you're scared of being trapped under sand.
Yes.
That's triggering, I would imagine.
Yeah.
So I want to get to a film, A Patch of Blue.
Oh, yeah.
Stanley Kramer. I really like A Patch of Blue.
I do too.
I think it's really sweet, and again, going back to Stanley Kramer, well intentioned. I think it's
Yes.
the chemistry between Sidney Poitier and Elizabeth Hartman, who plays this blind girl who he meets in the park and they form a connection with. I think it's really lovely, and I think the music is nice, and it just gives like this warm feeling for me. And we have Shelley Winters here playing her mother, I believe.
Oh my goodness.
And she is just tearing it up.
Yes. Shelley Winters is everything in this movie. I think this is a well-deserved supporting actress win from her. She's legitimately scary in this film. When she told her daughter that she was going to slug her in the puss, I legit like paused the movie. I let it sink in and I rewound it and I was like, there is no way in 1965 that Shelley Winters just told another woman that she was going to slug her in the puss. And I pressed play and Shelley Winters said it again and I was like, there's the Oscar. There it is. That's all you needed from me.
Yeah, that's it. That was her moment. She is something else in this. She is a force of nature.
Yes. I saw some parallels between her and Elizabeth Taylor and Virginia Woolf.
That's
very
fair.
very similar energy between the two.
Yeah, very body, very
Yeah.
in your face. Yeah.
Yes. And I was living for it.
Absolutely.
As the kids say.
We all stand Shelley Winters on this podcast. So
yes.
We stand a legend.
Right.
Yeah. And this was her second win. And she was very happy to win for a second time. Once again, going back to the fact that people in these days were like very shameless and open about wanting Oscars.
Yeah.
Which I love, and we should bring that back.
We really should.
Yeah.
I want a new petty legend.
I agree. Yeah, I don't even know like who is comparable to that these days. Is there anyone?
I'd have to think about that. I'm sure there is one who's just more secret about it these days.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's someone who's real petty.
I will say, having followed the Glenn Close narrative this past year, she did suggest in multiple interviews that she really wanted it.
Oh, yeah, she was going for it.
Yeah, that's another topic.
Yeah.
Speaking of triggered, oh boy. Okay.
Oh boy. The sand is falling on you.
The sand is coming on me and I can feel it. I need to get out of this. Okay. Well, this is not a traditional film, but I wanted to talk about this because it came out this year and is wonderful. I'm just going to throw it out here. I've mentioned TV before on this. I'm just going to say A Charlie Brown Christmas. It's wonderful.
Oh, okay, sure.
Yeah, it won an Emmy for this and well-deserved. A timeless classic. I just want to throw it out there. I know it's not a movie, but to me, it's a classic that I just wanted to mention that I saw. It was on Letterboxd. I look at all the films that were released that year, and that was one of them, and I just wanted to throw it out there.
Okay, sure.
Do you have any others on your list?
There's just one more. Alphaville. It's a Godard film. It's like a sci-fi noir about a secret agent who goes to space to find a missing person. I haven't seen it in a long time, but when I was just skimming through 1965 movies, I remember watching it in school and thinking it was really cool.
Yeah, that sounds cool.
So
I've not seen it.
Yeah, just throwing that out there. It's a very unique French New Wave sci-fi noir film.
Yeah. By the way, I think a lot of these films we've mentioned, some of the foreign ones are on Criterion Collection streaming.
Yeah, I think most of the movies I've mentioned are.
Yeah. So Women in the Dunes, which I watched this week, is on the Criterion channel, and definitely recommend that of any of these.
Oh yeah.
I agree. we kind of breezed by a few questions for some of these movies
Oh, okay.
that I just want to get to before we move on to our final segment. From Greg Pace said, was the Academy unusually open to foreign films that year? Umbrella's got a screenplay nom and Woman in the Dunes got a director nom.
Perhaps. Maybe they're becoming more open to the idea of it. But yeah, I'm very happy with those nominations.
Yeah.
I, of course, would have liked to have seen more from Woman in the Dunes in particular.
Mhm.
But yeah, maybe we're starting to see the Academy be a little more open with foreign films at this point.
Yeah. I think it really was started here that we did get to see more of all of the new wave films from other countries start to come in, and especially get some of these directing nominations. Like, I just talked about Blow Up and A Man and a Woman, things like that started to be embraced a lot more this decade. So yeah,
Right, and this year we also have nominated in Best Foreign Film, Marriage Italian Style,
Mm.
which Sophia Loren was nominated for the year prior in Best
Yeah.
Actress, which is interesting. Usually it's the other way around. Usually
Yeah,
you're nominated in foreign film first, then it's the next year you're open to the other category. So I'm not sure how that worked.
right. I don't
But
know what happened there, but I'll just explain because we've gotten a few questions about this kind of over the past few years about why a film is nominated for foreign language film and then gets nominated the next year for all the technical stuff and acting and things like that. I think the Academy just had a rule that, like, when the film comes out in that country, like, it's eligible for foreign film in that year.
right.
And once it comes out in the States, it can get nominated for all the other categories. Something like that. Yeah.
So I wonder if Marriage Italian Style played in the States first?
I don't know what happened there. I really
I don't
don't. Yeah, but
Yeah, I've got nothing.
yeah. Well, this was from Ed Stevens, who said, I've always found it confusing the fact that The Umbrellas of Cherbourg received 2 nominations for its score, one as original and the other as adaptation treatment. Why do you think this happened?
Did it have were they two separate pieces of music, I wonder?
I would
I don't know.
imagine that would be a reason. Yeah, because the original score nomination was for Michel Legrand and Jacques Demy, the director. And then the adaptation score was just Michel Legrand.
Hmm. Yeah, I
Uh,
would imagine they were two separate samples of music.
right.
That's the only like logical conclusion I can think of. Maybe there's a technicality in there
Yeah.
somewhere.
I think
But
maybe it's just Michel Legrand maybe took samples from other classical things maybe to
maybe.
put in here. And then they also had like actual original score at the same time. So yeah, that is very odd. I will agree.
Yeah.
But
It's like a
I,
script being both original and adapted at the same
right.
time.
Yeah, doesn't totally make sense there. Yeah, well, we have one more question from your friend Joey Gentili.
Oh boy.
Yes, your co-host on Academy Queens, who said, why do you think A Patch of Blue missed out on a spot here when clearly the Academy had a soft spot for its ladies? Especially during the 60s, it felt like an extremely important social piece that should have been a Best Picture nominee.
I could see it getting in, and personally, I would give it a Best Picture nomination over Ship of Fools. Ship of Fools is the one that I would bump to make room for it. I don't know if it would make my personal lineup of 5 films. Actually, it probably wouldn't. But if I could see it getting in, being the socially conscious, well-intentioned film of the year, having dealing with these issues of race amid the civil rights movement, and Sidney Poitier, I believe, had just won the year before.
Yeah, 2 years ago.
2 years ago for Lilies in the Field.
Yep.
And of course, the 2 actresses get nominated, and Stanley Kramer's having a year with actually Ship of Fools.
Right.
And this. So I guess, yeah, if I would rather him be more recognized for Patch of Blue, personally, than Ship of Fools.
Yeah.
So I could definitely see it getting in there.
Yeah, I will say I don't always agree with you, Joey, but I do think that Patch of Blue should have gotten in. I think that would have made more sense, and I'm really surprised that it didn't get in, honestly.
Yeah, it makes more sense on like a social, cultural level. I also think Patch of Blue is a more enjoyable movie than Ship of Fools.
100%.
And I would say it's more important with a capital I than
Right.
Ship of Fools, especially for the time in which it was made. So I could definitely see various reasons for why it should be in this Best Picture lineup,
Yeah.
especially when you have Ship of Fools somehow sneaking in there.
Yeah. And I know that it's like small scale film, and
That's
I'm sure it
true,
didn't cost that much, but then again, neither did A Thousand Clowns. So I don't
right?
know. I don't know what happened here.
Maybe the Academy was just swept up in the grandeur of
Yeah,
Ship of Fools.
sure. Yeah, I
I mean,
guess so.
that's the only like conclusion I can come to because I find the movie really not good.
Right. Actively bad. Yeah.
It's actively bad. It's not a movie I think I will ever watch again.
No. No.
Patch of Blue, I could probably see myself watching again at some point, but
Yeah.
not Ship of Fools.
Yeah. All right. Well, I guess that's all we have for. Well, actually, we did get one about Othello, which neither of us have seen, but it was about Laurence Olivier. This is from Cameron McRae, who said Laurence Olivier only had 3 minutes more screen time than Frank Finlay in Othello, yet Olivier was nominated for lead and Finlay for supporting. Is this the worst example of category fraud ever at the Oscars?
So yeah, like you said, I have not seen this version, but I have read Othello and I've seen a few productions. Iago and Othello are co-leads in that
Yeah.
story.
Yep.
Iago's the one who's really he drives the narrative. He's the one really engineering this story. He's sort of like the puppeteer of the entire thing, and Othello is like the tragic victim who we follow throughout the movie. So having not seen it and just knowing what the story is, I would say he probably should be in lead. He
They
and Lee
both should.
Marvin should probably switch.
Yeah, actually, that would be perfect.
Yeah, Frank and Lee Marvin had switched. That would make sense. But yeah, I haven't seen Othello, so I can't say with 100% certainty. But based on what I know, yeah, that's probably wrong.
Yeah, that makes sense. I don't think it's the worst example of category fraud ever at the Oscars by any means,
Right.
as Cameron McRae is asserting here, but is a pretty good example of the feeling just like this is Laurence Olivier. He's clearly the lead actor here, and nobody else can be
In the titular role.
Exactly. Thank you. Yeah, so that's all I had for my list. Very interesting year. A lot of, like we said, great films not in the English language in this year. And I would recommend quite a few of those that we mentioned in our Should Have Been a Contender. And a lot of them are available on streaming. So
Yes.
definitely watch those. Okay. So when we come back, we'll be delivering our verdict as to whether we think The Sound of Music deserved Best Picture or if Dr. Zhivago should have taken it.
For the Best Picture of the year, the members of the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences nominated these five: Darling, an amalgamated production, Embassy, Joseph Janney, producer. And Doctor Zhivago, a SoStar Metro Goldwyn Mayer British Studios production, Metro Goldwyn Mayer, Carlo Ponti, producer. The Sound of Music, an Argyle Enterprises production, 20th Century Fox, Robert Weiss, producer. And Ship of Fools, Columbia Pictures, Stanley Kramer, producer. And finally, A Thousand Clowns, a Harold production, United Artists, Fred Coe, producer. May I have the envelope, please? Thank you. The Sound of Music, Robert Weiss.
Accepting the Best Picture award for Robert Wise is Saul Chaplin.
And we're back. So now we'll be delivering our verdict as to whether we think The Sound of Music deserved Best Picture or if Dr. Zhivago should have taken it. Brandon, what is your verdict?
So I admire Dr. Zhivago for all it has going for it in front of the camera. I think it won all the things it should have won. The photography is gorgeous. The art direction is great. The costumes, the score. It's a very well-crafted film. But my winner goes to The Sound of Music. It's a more enjoyable film that has stood the test of time. It's a more rewatchable film. And simply, I'm just going to say it's a better film. Wow. So I think the Academy made the right choice, and The Sound of Music should have won Best Picture.
There you go. Yeah. I will co-sign that. I think The Sound of Music towers over the rest of these films, including Doctor Zhivago. I think nothing else comes close for me. Even if there's like weird parts at the end where it does turn a lot darker, it still leaves you so satisfied, I think, in the end. And even if the story is not totally like the best written thing and sort of glances over certain things, I think it's such a cathartic and enjoyable film that has completely stood the test of time more than most films in history. So I would
Right.
say that they made absolutely the right call here. And I don't even know if Dr. Zhivago would even be my number 2, to be honest.
In this lineup?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's probably my 3 or 4.
Yeah.
I think Darling is my runner-up,
Mm-hmm.
personally. I think
Yeah.
I'd probably go Sound of Music, Darling, Thousand Clowns, Zhivago, Ship of Fools.
I would probably say Sound of Music, definitely number 1 with a bullet. And then, yeah, I would say Darling, and then Dr. Zhivago, and then A Thousand Clowns, and then Ship of Fools. So pretty much the same.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, interesting year. The Academy made the right call in this case. I don't often say that as of late, so that's good on them. So thank you very much, Brandon, for coming on with me. I think this was great.
Of course, it was so lovely to be able to join you. I've been listening for quite a while, so I was very excited when you offered your invitation.
Yes, you have been a very loyal listener for a long time, so I'm glad to have you on, and I love Academy Queens. I think
Oh,
it's
thank you.
fantastic. Please tell the people where they can find you on the internet and tell us a little more about Academy Queens, because I think there's a lot of crossover.
Yeah, there kind of is. So,
Yeah.
so you can find me on Twitter. I'm just at Brandon Stanwyck, and I have a podcast called Academy Queens, which I co-host with Joey Gentili. And season 1 is all available to you, and that's the ladies of the 70s. What we do is we watch every best lead and supporting actress nominated film. We discuss the performances, and then at the end we rank them from 1 to 5 and decide who our personal winners of the year would have been. All of 1970 is available to you. We are in production right now on season 2, which is the 1980s lead and supporting actresses, and that should be available to you soon. We just dropped a bonus episode of 1950, so you get to hear us talk about All About Eve and Sunset Boulevard. So that's Academy Queens, and that's available on iTunes, Google Play, and Spotify, I believe. And I primarily write for Filmotomy these days. It's a little charming British movie site that lets me write things for them. That's Filmotomy. You can give them a follow on Twitter as well. And that's pretty much where you can find me. I'm also on Letterboxd. I think you just type my name. I don't think are there handles for Letterboxd? I don't remember.
Maybe.
I think you probably just type in my name.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't know if I can like say this, but I will be on an episode of Academy Queens.
Oh yeah,
coming soon.
I think we've said that. Yeah, we already recorded our 1983 episode, so you'll get to hear Kevin, Joey, and I discuss terms of endearment and Silkwood and the Big Chill. So it's a good episode.
Yes.
But I said chill this time.
Yes.
I keep saying Big Short when discussing the Big Chill.
Big Short, Big Chill, Big Sick.
Yes. So many bigs.
Yes. That was a fun episode to be part of.
Yeah,
I think we have a lot of differing opinions on that.
Yeah, we did. That was fun. And you are our first, I think, guest. You're the first guest we'll be releasing.
Oh my God. I'm so honored.
So yeah.
Wow. I love that. Okay. You can find me on Twitter at Kevin_Jacobson, and the show is at Oscar Runner Up, and the show is everywhere you can find podcasts. Also, I have a Patreon where I do bonus series. I do On Second Thought, where I talk about other Best Picture nominees that could have been conceivable as a runner-up that I didn't talk about on the regular show, and that's been very fun to do. I just dropped one on American Hustle, which was very fun and divisive, and everyone had different opinions on that. So please give that one a listen. And if you like what you hear, please go to patreon.com/andtherunnerup.is. So thanks again, Brandon.
Yes, thanks for having me.
And I will bid you all adieu.